Welcome to Trudge the Road. We're your hosts. I'm Rich, a recovered drug addict.
My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic.
And this week, we've got a lot of great stuff coming up. First, let me just tell you that Trudge the Road is brought to you by livefrogged.com. That's livefrogged.com. Firmly relying on God's grace every day.
Wonderful people, wonderful website.
They really are. Coming up, Dr. Joe is going to be joining us. Very excited about that, as we are every week. And sponsorship is another topic.
We're going to talk about sponsorship and how incredibly important it is.
But right now, we're going to talk about spiritual improvement.
Ooh, okay.
And basically, what I found was some tips for spiritual improvement. We'll start at number one, and then I'll get your thoughts on each one, Jerry.
Okay, doke.
Using personal prayer and or meditation.
Ah, yes. Very important. Meditation, that's kind of hard to define, because I think it's a little bit different for everybody. I was exposed to a group of folks when I was in the Louisville, Kentucky recovering community who were, in their traditional sense, meditators, transcendental. They just were so together, though. These people just seemed to have such a peace about themselves, and they directly related it to this level of meditation that they could achieve. And they had what I wanted. I'd like a little piece of that. And they said, by all means, please join us for this meditation process. And I remember getting around them, and there were candles, and it was a very serene environment. And the first thing they told me to do was empty my mind of all thoughts. What? Empty your mind of all thoughts. That's, well, I've never been able to do that before, So I'd give it a try. I would get there and kind of find that little moment of Zen, and then all of a sudden in the back of my head something would go off saying, did you go to Wendy's twice today? And I just could never achieve. I couldn't do it. And it just wasn't for me, that particular type of meditation. What I discovered, and completely by accident in meditation, was one day I was at the beach, and it was sunrise, and it was beautiful, and I just felt this communion, if you would, this closeness with God, as I chose to understand Him at that point in my recovery, because it has matured as I've gotten older and more spiritual, if you will, and was able to find that I could find that sense of being with God in a quiet moment, and at that time in an environment that was very special to me. And I'm able to take that environment, no matter if I'm in Philadelphia or Charlotte or New York or wherever, and put that in my head and go back to that moment and just find that peace. It's not really a sense of strength or direction. It's just it's peace. It's God as I choose to understand Him, just letting me know that He's there and that He cares and that He absolutely loves me. Today I like to meditate more on the suffering that I caused, and that has proven to me to be a great gift in that spiritual maturity. Does
that help you work through that?
Yeah, it does, because it's not like I'm alone. To really understand what I had done and the damage that I had caused, and most specifically to the people whom I loved the most, difficult. But this meditation process has seemed to bring that together, a sense of understanding, a sense of peace, and of course the ability to make the amends, which I have. But that guilt and that sense of shame that maybe goes along with it has been really relieved in this meditation process.
Do you find that you still have amends to make to people after 20-some years?
Oh, absolutely. And some I'll never be able to make. That's just impossible. But I am willing. And if the opportunity were to present itself, I would. And, that has actually come true. Because I've been sober for 23 years ago. The use of the internet today wasn't what it is today.
Sure.
And, through Facebook and different social medias, people whom from my past have found me, and this has given me the opportunity, because I was willing 23 years ago to make those amends. Now they're present. They're available for me to have that opportunity. And I am able to make them. And, part of that meditation process and understanding my role in this whole thing has been really helpful in making those amends legitimate, because I'm not sorry. I'm sorry. You've heard that a million times, but you haven't heard I was wrong,
right.
And here's what I'm going to do to correct that.
I don't get emails from people from my past. I think most of them think I'm dead.
That's probably true, because some of the responses I've gotten back were, oh my God, you're still alive?
Another tip for spiritual improvement, outside of what we were just talking about, personal prayer and or meditation, is spending time in groups, which is something we do when we go into the rooms of AA and NA.
Absolutely, and it means so much to me. I go to a meeting. I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. I go every day, and I have for my entire recovery. Not because I have to, because I want to. You know that it's where I find the answers. I'll take you back to my rabbi friend who we've talked about. I had an opportunity to meet a gentleman who is brilliant. Just by education alone, it's phenomenal. But on top, has this very religious, significant religious training as a rabbi. And I found him in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and he's never taken a drink of alcohol in his life. And the obvious question is why are you here? And he was there for reasons of spirituality, what we're talking about right now. And he told me, he said, Jerry, I absolutely believe that God is in the temple. I believe that God is in the cathedral, but I know God is in meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous because I hear him. And that is absolutely true. That is the venue that God uses to communicate not just direction to us, but his love. There's no expectations on us. We're children of God. And this is where you find that information. So is it part of my spiritual journey to be in these meetings every day? Absolutely. Is it a pleasure? Most certainly.
And just grouping up with people after the meeting, maybe going out to get something to eat is important as well.
Absolutely. They call it the meeting after the meeting or whatever. But again, everybody who is with you in that group is focused on one thing, and that is a spiritual means to this malady of a recovery. And how we communicate that could be in any way, and certainly having a good time, having fun is certainly a way to communicate that. And that's a way, and in my opinion, that's gratitude to God. Let me give you the example. I had Chelsea and Mia and my son-in-law, my granddaughter, my daughter, and my son-in-law at the beach this summer, and it was strictly in a position of observation. I was just sitting in the beach chair, enjoying the beautiful beach, and I see my daughter down there, and my granddaughter and my son-in-law, and they're just having a blast. They're playing in the sand and jumping in the ocean, and there's this $1,000,000 smiles on their face, and it just made me feel so good. Those are my children, and they are having a wonderful time, and I'm exposed to that, and the feeling that gave me is one that is not only, in my opinion, indefinable. I just don't think there's words in the English language that could really define that sense of peace and happiness. So I think that when we're having this fun, when we're playing with God's children in the sandbox of life here, he smiles down on that, and it's very spiritual.
Another tip for spiritual improvement: spend time learning. Growing your mind. Very, very important. We spend a lot of time with the big book. We read these things, but, just learning, even when we're talking about groups and going out to eat, it helps us enhance our interpersonal relationships with people. You learn about communicating because, let's face it, when we were out there, we weren't communicating too well.
No.
Hey, you got the stuff? Hey, give me the stuff.
Yeah.
Get away from me. Those are not equal communication sort of relationships. And learning, not only book learning, but internet learning, gathering information, things like this helps grow your mind.
You're absolutely correct. And that learning process that we experience in Alcoholics Anonymous is from the beginning. There's so many things I just didn't know how to do. How to act normally in society, to me, was a learning process. Learning to have fun. I had to learn to have fun. I had to learn to be able to communicate with you over subject matter that didn't include drugs and alcohol, because that's all I knew how to talk about. I had to learn all of these things, and that process of education was given to me freely within the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous. It was a lesson I was getting that I didn't even know I was receiving at the time, and I'm ever so grateful that I got it today.
Now, we talk about being in groups and relationships and things of that nature, but another tip for spiritual improvement is taking time for yourself.
Absolutely.
Just spending a little time, plan a quiet day for just you, away from family, away from work, indulging yourself in quiet.
I think that it's such a great gift, one that I can certainly appreciate today. And speaking on behalf of everybody in this room, the producers, and of course you, is that our lives are incredibly hectic, and there's a lot of pressure and stress. I've got, of course, my career to deal with, family to deal with, and my recovering family to deal with. And I'm proud to say I'm in the middle of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there are people who need me. And at times it's stressful that they'll pull, you know, but they do, and sometimes it can wear on you a little bit, you know. So when you've got that time to re-energize, if you will, to spend time you alone with God as you choose to understand Him, and get that energy back, get that feeling back, get that focus back, get that direction back, and get ready to jump back in the pool of this recovery again.
Love it. Recharging yourself, just recharging yourself. And as I've told you on many occasions, some of my best conversations come when I'm in the car talking to myself.
How many times have I been the recipient of really brilliant things that you've thought of in the car? You know, you go, hey, man, I've got something. You know, I always know it's going to be good because you thought about it in the car.
Another tip, physical fitness and proper diet. Now, these are easy things to say, but the physical fitness part, I think, comes from us not out doing what we were doing that actually brought us to where we are. You know what I'm saying? In other words, you know, I mean, I didn't do a lot of physical activity when I was out there getting high. I mean, you know, the physical activity, I was just trying to keep my mind focused, trying to stay out of
jail.
Yeah, stay out of jail. And you know, I wasn't planning on going, hey, you know what? Let's go down to the gym later on today. Hold on a second. Let me smoke this bowl first. You know, it wasn't like that. So physical fitness is very important, and proper diet is very important as well, because as you know, I was a speed freak. So, I mean, I wouldn't eat for 3 or 4 days, and then I would eat everything.
Right.
That's no way to eat a proper diet.
No, it's not. And, you know, this is the disease of magnification, and I'm afraid that some of us is addicted people, when we hear physical fitness, we think that's getting into Olympic shape, you know, and that's not necessarily the case. Find something to do that's fun, that's physical, because you'll feel better. That's what we've been trying to do our whole lives, is feel better. This is an element that will help. And you might just find yourself enjoying playing racquetball or golf or whatever you're going to do that's going to get out there and give you a little bit of that physical exercise. The eating thing is difficult because for me, food can be similar to alcohol and drugs. I will eat to feel better, you know, and that is wrong. If I eat correct, I will feel better legitimately, and it takes a little time, just like getting over the, you know, the first process of not drinking. There's pain involved. There was pain involved, as you know, with me, to learn how to eat right. You know, it was a difficult process, but once I achieved that process and it became normal, the weight went away, and physically I became much healthier and feel better. So we put that feel better because of a better diet on top of feel better because of a little bit of exercise. We're just putting plus in this positive living attitude that we've received so graciously from Alcoholics and Narcotics Anonymous.
And you have a lot of credibility going right now because, you know, those folks who obviously can't see you and didn't know you 6-7 months ago would see a marked difference in your appearance because you've lost. How much weight have you lost?
You know, I'm really not sure. I don't keep track of it. I'm healthy now. I'm at a healthy weight. And
I would say 20 to 30 pounds.
It's probably twice that. You know,
but you did it through healthy eating.
Exactly. There was no diet involved. It was just a matter of eating healthy. And the goal wasn't to lose the weight. The goal was to be healthy. And so this is a side effect that I just look great.
Well, another thing that a tip for spiritual improvement, I mean, maybe we just talked about it a little bit in the first part of your answer to physical fitness, is recreation. Just going out and doing something for fun. And it harkens back to last week. We talked about going out and doing bowling.
And I've got to be the best in the whole world the first time out, or it's not going to be any fun.
Sure, but getting out and recreating, whether it be with your family or with your friends or maybe just by yourself, get involved and go out and do a physical activity. Not like, you know what, I'm going to do that. I'm going to do. Just go out and do it.
Exactly.
Why not?
You know, I'll give you an example. We were down at Murdy, my daughter with a gang, and they wanted to go play miniature golf. It was only about 105 outside. You know, last thing I wanted to do. Oh, come on, you know. But, you know, I've learned today to do what my family wants. You know, that's just being a responsible dad. And so we went to play miniature golf. And, of course, I'm thinking this is going to be horrible. It's going to be hot and all this. Well, you know, we ended up just having a blast, you know, and the laughs and the thrills. And, yeah, it was hot, and we complained about that, but just, you know, had a little bit more orange juice to drink and felt better about it. And it turned out to be a great time. So what did we have? We had exercise, we had recreation, we had family, we had fun. It all works out, and it seems so simple. We take those simple things, we make them so complex, and we project that this is going to be bad, it's going to be too hot, this is going to be dumb, I'm not going to have any fun, me. and we don't take into consideration other people may want to do something. And when we can, for 1 minute, let that selfishness and self-centeredness go and attach ourselves onto what they already know is going to be a good time, surprise, surprise, we have fun too.
You didn't walk away from it disappointed because you lost your miniature golf championship.
I had learned my lesson from the bowling that I did not have to be Tiger Woods on the miniature golf course to have a good time.
All right,
even though I was the best.
I'm sure you were. I beat my granddaughter by at least 15 strokes.
She's 3.
And finally, the last tip for spiritual improvement, which I think is a very big one, is being of service.
Oh, man, that's the ultimate. That's absolutely the ultimate. I'm going to take you back to the 1930s. Bill Wilson, who was the co-founder of our program, this happened in Towns Hospital in New York, and there was no denying. He knew exactly what the issue was, his alcoholism, and that he was about to die, and things were completely bleak. And he said these words. He said these exact words. He said, "I wonder if I can't get sober by helping another alcoholic get sober." The answer to that question, ladies and gentlemen, holds what is the true essence of human nature. You and I were created to love. That's why we're here. We were created to love. And what is the true definition of love? The true definition of love is being of ultimate service to others. That's the 12th step of our program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's the beauty of this spiritual chat we've had. And the fact of the matter is that we come into Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous trying to get these horrendous issues solved, and yet we come to find out why we were created, why we were here, to love, to be of ultimate service of others. It's the ultimate in spirituality, and we get to do that every day in Alcoholics Anonymous. What a gift, what a gift.
Yeah, it builds self-esteem, and of course, when you do it with no reward expected, it really is a beautiful feeling, and it does lead to that spirituality.
Exactly, and that is the reward, is that feeling. It's that, and again, one of those things, I can't define it. You just have to experience it, and we encourage you to do so. You'll find it. You'll find that feeling in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous, and you'll find people there who understand. And what do they understand? Your pain. They understand your pain. And believe me, you'll feel that when you walk in the doors. Please, don't hesitate.
We'd like to thank our sponsor for this show, livefrogged.com, firmly relying on God's grace every day. livefrogged.com.
Wonderful people doing some wonderful things. Please check them out.
They truly are. All right, coming up, Dr. Joe, sponsorship on Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Dr. Joe joins Jerry to discuss how addiction is a disease and not a choice on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to Trudge the Road. This is an hour-long program dedicated to people who are suffering from the disease of addiction. Not only those who are alcoholic and drug addicts, but just as importantly, friends and family. My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic. My partner, Rich, who's a recovered drug addict, will be along here shortly. But with us now is our resident professional, Dr. Joseph Troncale. Dr. Joe, thank you very much for being here.
My pleasure.
Dr. Joe can offer a lot of answers to the disease of addiction, and I suppose we would say its perception in our society as well as thousands of years back. It is indeed a disease, but a lot of us would look at it as an issue of character or morality, and understandably so, but that is not the case, and you offer a good explanation.
Well, let's just talk about it from the disease concept. If we started looking at other types of illnesses like people that have heart disease or people that have diabetes or people that have any other chronic illness, it's amazing how many chances people get with their other chronic diseases. If you have the third heart attack, nobody asks whether or not you've had 2 previous heart attacks. They just treat you in the hospital and you go on your way. The same thing for diabetes. If you continue to have problems with your weight or with sugars or whatever, you're going to continue to get treated. Unfortunately, in the case of alcoholism or addiction, what happens is if you've failed treatment, then that sort of carries on with you, that you somehow have screwed up or that you are not quite ready for the task or whatever. And so people look down on you as somebody who is just not inadequate or as somehow has a character flaw or whatever.
Or worse,
Or
morally
worse.
incompetent.
Right, or you end up in jail.
Right.
And as I think I've said on this program before, if people's pancreas was in their brain, then diabetics would be in jail all the time. And so the problem with the whole perception of alcoholism as a disease is that it has a behavioral component associated with it because it's a brain disease. And so the very parts of your brain that control your behavior are the parts of your brain that are affected by alcoholism or addiction. And so since there's such a strong behavioral component, people tend to look at the behavior and not at the problem. So the problem, and from a standpoint of treatment, is that if you treated alcoholism or addiction the same way you treated other types of diseases, then we would probably have a part of the hospital, every hospital, that would be dedicated to people with addiction. And as I've told you before, if you look at hospitalization statistics, most of the people who have addiction problems constitute probably twice as many people in the hospital as you would expect from the general population. So those alcoholics and addicts are in the hospital. They're just not identified as alcoholism or addiction as their primary problem.
They're being treated for the ramifications of the disease.
Absolutely. They might have liver disease, or they might have hallucinations, or they might have this, that, or the other, or they may even be recognized as somebody that has an addiction, but the only reason they got in the hospital is because they can't function on the outside. And unfortunately, they get treated for those symptoms, and then instead of getting the treatment that they need for their addiction, they'll be sent back out into the world or the streets or whatever.
And the cycle just continues.
And yes, and so it becomes a vicious cycle.
Now, I want to take you to go back to something you said about our behavior and being a component, and to maybe explain that a little further. And let me state this, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the behavior that we show when we're drinking and using, the very negative behavior with the very adverse consequences, is it safe to say that's part of the pathology of this disease, or is that...
It's absolutely part and parcel of the disease. In other words, the part of the brain that is affected by alcoholism and addiction is the exact same part of the brain that controls our behavior. And so you can't separate one from the other. And that's why it gets people into so much trouble from a social standpoint, from a family standpoint. People are looking at your behavior. People are trying to have a relationship with an alcoholic or an addict, and they find that they can't do that. They don't understand that, and they don't understand why it is that they can't change that behavior for whatever reason. And so people are looked upon as behavioral pariahs, so to speak. So they are ostracized, and they tend to isolate themselves more and more because of the disease and because they're not getting adequate treatment.
As a sober person now for 23 years, is my brain damaged? Question A. And question B, is this a mental illness?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it exactly as a mental illness, but I certainly would characterize it as a problem with what we call the limbic system of the brain. And there's a part of your brain that constitutes everything from the frontal part of the brain, which has to do with emotion and with control of behavior and that sort of thing, to the pleasure center, which is the part of the brain that gets stimulated when you use drugs or alcohol, to memory, to rage and sexual behavior and all those sorts of things. And they're all part of this one circuit that we call the limbic system of the brain. And in drug addicts and alcoholics, what happens is that after you've been using drug or the alcohol for a period of time, that part of your brain dysregulates. In other words, instead of being able to, if you were someone who could drink and were not a drug addict or an alcoholic, and you could, say, go out and have a few beers or whatever, that part of your brain re-regulates the next morning. And so you're back to kind of where you were before, and you can take it or leave it. For the alcoholic or the addict, once that part of the brain dysregulates, then you're basically off to the races, and you're unable to control the compulsions that are associated with it. So that makes you different from the standpoint of how your brain is working, and it also will make you different behaviorally, because once that whole system goes out of control, you take on the characteristics of the addict, which is basically a liar or a compulsive behavioral person. You're doing things that you would never do when you were not under the influence. And the cravings and the behavioral changes are so profound that, again, they are out of the bounds of regular behavior that we would see in somebody that we would consider quote unquote normal.
What now? We're going to come back and we're going to talk more. I want to talk more about the family. But if I have a broken leg and I come to you as a doctor, you can fix me up pretty quick. Now, if I've got alcoholism, I come to you as a doctor. It's not quite that easy, and the treatment's a little bit different.
And that's the problem with the whole thing, because there's so many facets associated with this. The treatment is so complicated. Generally speaking, an alcoholic at first blush doesn't want to think that they're an alcoholic, number one. And so the denial system is very pervasive. So you can tell somebody, look, it looks like you've got a drinking problem. And they'll go, no, I don't. I don't drink as much as so-and-so.
I'm depressed.
Right. Yeah. Or I'm depressed. Or I just had some bad luck. Or the cops got me and they didn't get, yeah, or whatever. You know, I mean, you'll hear every possible excuse. And the alcoholic addict really believes what they're telling you. So they're not lying to you about the fact that they feel so misunderstood. They really believe that they are unlucky, or that they're not as bad as somebody else, or whatever. That's part of the disease. I always tell people that addiction is actually a disease of the eyes. You can't see what's going on right in front of you. And neither really can family members and that sort of thing. In other words, all these things start to swirl around. People know that there's some sort of a problem. Even the alcoholic addict realizes there's some sort of a problem, but they don't know what to do. And they don't see alcohol or drugs as the primary problem.
And as you know, in my own addiction, it got to the point, and this is true, where I would choose alcohol and drugs over food. You know, I would take that first, but still believe that like maybe something magic was going to happen. This was just going to go away, or, you know, tomorrow everything was going to be okay. Yet making decisions like that, first the alcohol and first the drugs, then, you know, basic food. And
right.
That's where so many of us end up.
Well, and again, going back to whether you want to label it as a mental illness or something, that is the insanity of the disease. In other words, you are not making rational choices. You are not rationally interacting with other individuals. You are not rationally doing things on the job. All these things tend to add up. People, generally speaking, can see it from probably about a mile away once things get full blown. But then again, it's the whole business of trying to figure out trying to confront the patient, whoever that alcoholic addict is, because they know they're going to get kickback and they don't want to fool with it, or they just end up firing the person or doing something that's very drastic. And then the alcoholic addict just becomes that much more adamant that everybody's against them.
Right.
And so there's this vicious cycle that continues down because nobody's calling a spade a spade.
Mm-hmm. And it's absolutely true, because, you know, when I was telling those lies, and when, you know, everybody was out to get me, the world is my enemy. I think if you'd have put me on a lie detector test, it'd come out me telling the truth, because I believed it.
Absolutely. And again, we talk about this limbic system as being just the lizard brain, because again, when you're in your active addiction or alcoholism, you're acting like a lower form of life.
I'm going to hold you right there, Dr. Joe. I got to hold you right there. We got to take a break, but we got to tell everybody that listening to the lizard brain and your explanation of how we are as addicts makes such perfect sense to those out there who maybe have an addict or an alcoholic in their life right now. You don't want to miss that. Dr. Joe TRONCALE coming up here in just a moment as we continue on Trudge the Road, brought to you this week by livefrog.com.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up, Rich and Jerry discuss sponsorship in AA and NA and how important it is to have one on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.
Welcome back to Trudge the Road, brought to you by livefrog.com, firmly relying on God's grace every day. That's livefrog.com. On the way, Dr. Joe is going to be stopping in.
Dr. Joe is going to be, that's Dr. Joe TRONCALE, by the way. Dr. Joe is a physician who is not addicted, but as his practice treats those of us who are, we couldn't be more grateful for that. And he has got some answers. I mean, there are a lot of questions, especially if there is someone in your life who is suffering from the disease of addiction. Questions that you have that nobody seems to have the answers to, he does, and he'll join us.
Tell us why we're here, Jerry. Tell us why we do this show.
We're giving back. I mean, what has been given so freely to us, both Rich and I were done. I mean, we were, as far as our health and society was concerned, we were finished. And because of the program, the 12 steps in AA in my case and in NA in your case, we live happy, joyous, free, prosperous lives now. And we just feel it a responsibility to be able to share which was so freely given to us.
Now, this segment, we are going to talk about something you have a lot of experience with, sponsorship.
Sponsorship is incredibly important, and you'll hear this, a lot in the recovering community about my sponsor. Who is a sponsor? What are they there for? What do they do? In its definite form, it's a defined form, a sponsor is there to guide you through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous or of Narcotics Anonymous. That is their major role. They're not there to lend you money or get you out of jams or give you advice in relationships, things of that nature. It's to guide you through the 12 steps. But in that process, your own sociologies are going to merge, and there are going to be opportunities for you to get answers to life questions that you're either afraid to answer yourself or don't have the courage to process through. And that's okay. In early recovery, we certainly understand that. And a sponsor can be incredibly helpful in that life process. Now, let's go back to the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and getting sober, which is the real reason your sponsor is there, to guide you through these steps. Now, let me give you an example. If we, Rich, were to decide to go on a safari in Africa, and we got ourselves a map, and we went to Africa, how would things go? Couple of things to take into consideration. I've never been to Africa. Have you?
No.
Have you ever been on a safari?
No.
No? How good are you at reading maps?
Not very good.
All right. We might make it. I mean, we might make it if we follow this map real carefully, but we've never been there before. We might get off the beaten path, and all of a sudden, there's a tiger there to eat us, a lion, whatever, because we got lost. All right. Now, what if we decided to go on this trip, but we got a guide? Somebody who has been there before, somebody who already knows the way without having to look at the map all the time. And that person were to guide us through this safari. Our chances of getting off the beaten path are reduced tremendously because they've already been there. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to be able to look at and enjoy all the cool things around us because we're not having to focus on this map all the time. So we can enjoy it and get a whole lot more out of it. Sponsorship in Alcoholics Anonymous is exactly the same. We have a map. It's called the Big Book, and it's a good map, and it will take us there. But again, we're not that good at following maps or following directions. So what we do is get a sponsor, a guide, who has already been there so that he can walk with us on this journey we've never been before. This is all new. The 12 steps are all new. And if that person is guiding us through this process, there's a lot less of a chance that we're going to, slip off the road and get eaten by that lion. And by that, I mean, take a drink or a drug. Plus, in this process of being guided with that care, somebody who's already been there, it gives us the opportunity to look at life on life's terms without having to worry so much about focusing continually on that map so that we can begin to get an understanding of the reality of what our disease has done, as well as a reality of where it's going to take us. And if we've got that sponsor, that person who's already been there, that person who has knowledge, that person who has answers, our chances of succeeding in this journey are as good now as our chances of succeeding in that safari to Africa.
Now, I'm going to play the role of somebody who just came into the rooms. Now, I need a sponsor. How do I go about finding a sponsor?
It's pretty simple. Go to the meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous and listen for somebody who says something that impresses you, something that you can feel deep down, that you make a communique to, and that you feel maybe a sense of trust or bond. And ask that person, if you would, to be my temporary sponsor. Let's see how this thing goes. Because sometimes someone will come to me and ask me to be their sponsor. I'll act as their temporary sponsor till we find out that if there is somebody else whom I know possibly within the recovering community that has maybe something more closely aligned to their own sociology that would be a better sponsor. The long story short is we'll get you to the right person. You just have to ask and be open-minded, as simple as that.
Because there's already that fear when you come in. Like, let's face it, we're addicts.
We don't want to ask anybody's help.
We don't. And God forbid we get rejected.
Oh, Lord. Yeah.
So we walk in and we ask somebody, and what do we do in that scenario? Would that person guide me to who I need to be guided to? If I ask them and say, you know what, I'm carrying too many right now. I can't do it.
Yeah, God will guide you, and that happens a lot. That's what I have to say all the time. You know, I have a limit. There's so much time I have, and I need to give my undivided attention to the people I sponsor when they need it. So to take on a whole bunch of them is just, wrecking everybody's life. So I do have a limited amount, and I do tell people, I would take you on as a sponsor. I can't now. I have too many. But I always follow that up with making sure that we get them on the track to find somebody else, at least a temporary sponsor, to begin this process.
So when you get a sponsor, is that, let's say you move past temporary and that person becomes your sponsor, does that person be your sponsor? Like, I know Dr. Burns is your sponsor and has been your sponsor
He's been
for
my
years
temporary.
and years.
He's my temporary sponsor. He's been my temporary sponsor for 23 years, and it will stay that way. Because we've never really bonded. I'm not 100% sure yet.
So you're saying once you make this connection, is it a long-term relationship? Can it end at any time?
Sure,
is it a mutual
it can.
agreement when
Sometimes
it does?
you'll mature, you'll change, and you'll need other direction, and you will move on. I think it's probably pretty rare that I have maintained one sponsor this long of a time. But then again, he's not my pal. He ain't my friend, and that's. I get the invitation every Christmas to come over, but we don't hang together. Our sociologies are different. He is there, and he plays that role, but I have a level of trust that I just can't define. And if he needs me, I'm going to be there, no matter what, because he's always been there for me when I needed him. And now that the relationship is 23 years old, there's reciprocation. I'm not just asking him for things, and there's some things he needs now that I can be of help with. And that's a beautiful thing to be able to do that, because I don't think I'd be alive with the fact that he wasn't there always telling me the truth. I didn't want to hear it. I didn't want it. It would make me angry, but he refused to coddle me. He refused to let me rationalize. He tried to eliminate the gray area in a lot of my thinking so that I would learn something. And did I resent him in that process? Oh, God, yes. I was so angry, but it's always in the back of my mind. The thing I was most angry at was he was right. Oh, I hate that. I hate it when they're right, And that's the way that relationship kind of is. But do I love him? With my whole heart and soul.
So when somebody comes to you, are these ground rules that you lay out in the beginning? Because let's face it, we're feeling needy when we come in.
Right.
And so we find someone that's going to listen to it. You're going to be my sponsor. Wow, you're going to be like my father figure. You're going to help me with all these things. And there's that emotional latching. Do you have to sit down beforehand and say, look, this is the way it's going to go?
Really, absolutely. Yeah, you can form a very unhealthy relationship almost instantly. So, and it's not rules, guidelines, things of that nature. It's what you, as my sponsee, are going to do. You are going to call me every day. You are going to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous every day. You are going to take an Alcoholics Anonymous commitment. Those are the three things that are black and white. If you're not willing to do those, that's cool. Just go find somebody else. But if you're going to be a sponsee of mine, those are three things you got to, because it's my opinion, that's how you get sober. And that's mandatory. And some people want it, some people don't.
Females and male sponsors.
It doesn't work. It just, stay with the gender. Then it's specific. I would never have the audacity to say that I know what it's like for a woman to get sober. I do know this. It's harder than it is for a man. Label me a bad father. Okay, you're a bad father. Wear the label a bad mother. It's just that whole sociological stress that is put on the female gender of alcoholics and drug addicts that is just that much more stressful. And those are issues that I think you have to be of that gender to be able to relate to. I can't. I'm not there. I don't know what it's like to be labeled a bad mother. But there are women in Alcoholics Anonymous who do, and you can bring to conclusion those feelings if you're communicating with somebody who understands.
With that being said, should you line up age as well?
No, I don't think that's important at all. No,
well, I'm just saying, like, let's say somebody of my age who's older, pushing 50, comes in, and there's a guy who's got 7 years of clean time, but he's only 24. Is that a person I should probably ask, or no?
Yeah.
Does it matter?
No, I don't. It's the quality. It's number one is quality, not quantity. I know people who are 25 years sober whose sponsors are maybe 16, 17 years sober. It's because they had what they wanted. Time does not equal, tremendous sobriety. It certainly plays a significant role, but years don't mean good clean time and good sober time, as you well know. Let me put it this way. let me create this picture in your head, and I think you'll be able to understand this whole sponsorship thing. You know who Charlie Brown is from
Yes,
Peanuts.
absolutely.
Charlie Brown. I always, could you relate? You can relate to Charlie Brown. can't
Sure.
you? Every alcoholic and drug addict has that feeling. Poor Lucy pulling the football, all that nasty stuff and those feelings. All right, so we've got that taken into consideration. Charles Schulz, who was, of course, the author of Peanuts, passed away on the same day that Tom Landry, the great coach of the Dallas Cowboys, passed away. And that was just a coincidence. And what I'm going to tell you right now is an illustration that I saw in the Philadelphia Inquirer that happened on that day, okay? Now, you've got a picture of this. You've got a picture of the legendary Tom Landry wearing his fedora, dressed as he always was, one of the, arguably greatest coaches of all time,
Sure.
okay? And he's holding, little Charlie Brown is standing next to him, and he's holding his hand. And they're walking towards the pearly gates. And the caption says, "Come on, boy, I'm going to teach you how to kick a football." That is sponsorship. The destination is the same. We're going to the pearly gates. There are things in life that have just set us crazy, where there's Lucy pulling away the football or not being able to kick it, and that's what sponsorship is I'm going to hold your hand, we're going to walk on this journey together, and we'll overcome those things that are so monumental in your life, be they small, be they large, or whatever. We'll do this together. And that picture of Tom Landry and holding little Charlie Brown's hand, that's it. That's sponsorship. That's what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. And I assure you, the pearly gates of heaven are the same destination. I absolutely believe that I am a spiritual being who is on a human journey, and I'll return to that spiritual life. I don't think that I'm a human being in search of this spirituality. I believe I've already experienced it, and this is a part of me, part of my life, my experience in this life, to understand more so that I can be of a better service in a spiritual life.
Awesome analogy. Great visual as well. We'd like to thank our sponsor, livefrogged.com. That's LIVEFROGGED.com. Firmly relying on God's grace every day. You have a great interview with Dr. Joe coming up.
It's sweet, man. He's going to answer some questions. That guy's amazing.
And we don't want you to miss it. It's coming up on Trudge the Road.
You're listening to Trudge the Road. Coming up next, Jerry and Dr. Joe finish their conversation from earlier in the program by discussing the lizard brain on the Trudge the Road radio network.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, back to Trudge the Road. Again, this is a program dedicated to folks who suffer from the disease of addiction, and just as importantly, their family members and loved ones, because it certainly is a family disease. My friend Rich, who is a recovered drug addict, will be along here with me in just a few moments. My name is Jerry. I'm a sober alcoholic. Our resident professional joins us again, Dr. Joseph Troncale. Thank you so very much for being here, Dr. Joe. We appreciate it immensely.
So glad to be here.
We had a wonderful conversation earlier about the disease, about the perception, and about the reality of how huge a deal it is. And I told everybody to hang around and listen to what the lizard. Tell us about the lizard brain.
Well, one of the things that I think was not well understood for years and years about the physiology of the brain is that there is a part of the brain that is almost automatic. And the reason we call it the lizard brain is if you take any sort of lower form of animal behavior and that sort of thing, it's all about what we call the 4 F's: fight, flight, feeding, and reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole thing is that these people who have the disease of addiction basically live in the bottom of their brain. And that's not something that we're trying to criticize the person about.
Not a derogatory statement.
It's not meant to be derogatory. It's just what happens. Again, it's just like if somebody has, again, going back to diabetes or something like that, if their blood sugar is too low, then they start to act goofy. But it's not because the person is a goofy person. It's because they're just not getting enough sugar to their brain, and so things start to go haywire. When people are under the influence of drugs or alcohol, what happens is that you basically get cut off from your logical system, which you would call the higher centers of the brain. And if you do SPECT scans or these kind of sophisticated brain scans, you can actually watch the blood flow in the brain change from one area of the brain to the other. And what happens in people who have addiction is that most of their blood flow is in this bottom part of the brain where you're doing all of these fight or flight sorts of behaviors. So you're basically in survival mode. And so you're going to get from an addict exactly what you would expect to get from somebody who is either fearful, afraid, confrontational, angry, all these sorts of things that we associate with what we would say is kind of out of control behavior. But actually what's happening is that the addict is just trying to figure out a way to survive, get their cravings met, get whatever it is that they need to support their addiction met, all these sorts of things. Now, I'm not excusing that behavior. All I'm trying to say is that is the reality of what addiction is. Addiction is fight or flight. And people are smart enough or sophisticated enough at some level to be able to take all of their old learned behaviors and incorporate that into fight or flight behavior. So to use that as an example, again, try confronting an alcoholic sometime and see what you get. They basically act like a caged animal, or they will completely deny that there's a problem to start with. So people who are trying to interact with an alcoholic when they're active in their addiction are not going to get anywhere. It's like talking to a brick wall. But what you have to do is you have to continue to try to get the alcoholic addict to hear what they're saying. And so the way that you get somebody out of that lizard brain behavior is basically not to confront the behavior so much as to have them just continue to hear what they're saying. So we get, as a professional, we get addicts to basically reflect back to us whatever it is they're saying. So you're telling me that the cops are all after you. In other words, if they can get enough into their logical system, what they're finally going to understand is that, well, maybe the cops aren't all after me, or maybe something I'm doing really is not quite right, or something along those lines. But on the other hand, if you go to somebody and you say, you're really screwing up or something like that, you immediately revert back into, it's like having a caged animal. They're basically going to revert back into their limbic system, their lizard brain, their fight or flight. And what's going to happen is you're just going to end up with this conflagration where everybody just gets upset, angry, nothing happens. And again, like I said, if anybody's, I'm sure nobody in the audience has ever been angry, but if anybody in the audience has ever been angry, understand what it's like and how logical you are when you're in anger mode. Now multiply that times 5 and you've got alcoholism or addiction. It's complete chaos in the brain, and it's complete rationalization. It's complete, I'm not doing anything wrong. You are the problem, or something outside of myself is the problem.
It's much further than justifying your behavior. Speaking about myself, I didn't justify my behavior. I was just right.
Correct. It's very black and white. You know, it's very either you're right or you're wrong. It's very, I didn't do this. You're accusing me of something. And so again, people tend to just, like I said, they just go into this mode where there is no logic, there is no explanation, there is no communication. You're just going to end up in a fight.
That's addiction.
That's addiction in a nutshell.
That's it right there. Now, let me take you to the next step. How is that going to affect somebody I love? Let me just use myself as an example with that type of insane behavior. And me not being able to in any way see the reflection of truth. Or reality as far as that goes, and how it would diminish and change the behavior of those people who were the front line in trying to help me, and frankly became quite ill themselves.
Absolutely. And the only people that really put up with addicts or alcoholics for any period of time have the sort of direct opposite problems with their brain themselves. What's happening is they're able to suppress anger. They're able to completely ignore all the warning signs. They're able to walk on eggshells. They're able to do lots of things that most people would never do. That's why, again, generally speaking, alcoholics either have codependent friends or they have no friends at all, because either somebody's willing to put up with the insanity and sort of have somebody get along with them, take care of them, do all these crazy things that nobody else would do.
We would seek them out.
Absolutely. Right. And they and these codependent people seek out alcoholics. Again,
right.
We've talked about this before, but if you put 50 people in a room and you had 5 codependents and 5 alcoholics, the 5 codependents will find the 5 alcoholics and vice versa.
It's so true.
And they're basically geared to do that. And if you start studying their family systems and that sort of thing, what you'll find out is that probably there was alcoholism both in the codependent's family or alcoholism in the alcoholic's family. And so they learn at some level how to get along. It's very dysfunctional and it doesn't help the alcoholic or the addict, and it certainly doesn't help the codependent spouse or whoever it is, or the family members who are trying to, quote, help the alcoholic, but in fact they're not helping at all, because what they're doing is they're allowing the alcoholic to continue to act in their lizard brain fashion and get away with it without any confrontation.
And it's hard to love a lizard.
Yeah, well, I always used to talk about this with family members of alcoholics. I always said, how many people in this room who has had a lizard for a pet? And some people would raise their hands, and I say, well, what did you get out of the relationship? And the answer was always nothing. And
right.
And the only thing that you would get out of it by being in a relationship with an active alcoholic or addict is you get the opportunity to drive yourself crazy and take care of somebody and look like a martyr. And there are people out there who at some level thrive on their ability to suffer.
Right. Oh, yeah.
It makes you somehow feel better, look better to the community. You are sort of a saint. You've got jewels in your crown,
right,
or whatever. There's all kinds of ways of rationalizing codependent behavior. But again, it's a very sick system. So we're here on this show, I hope, to try to just have people recognize that, look, if things aren't working for you, if something just seems like it's not right, then probably it's not right. Now, we're not here to tell you that you're crazy or anything like that. All we're trying to do is say, look, if you know that there's alcoholism or addiction in your family, and you know that you're probably putting up with way more than you're supposed to put up with, then maybe it's time to just look at all of this and talk to some other people and try to figure out some ways around this. That's really where AA and Al-Anon come in, because what they do is they teach people to achieve sobriety and sanity on their own. In other words, I'm not going to change an alcoholic. I wouldn't try to change you, Jerry, if you were active in your alcoholism or your addiction. Now, I'm more than willing to try to help you if you can see it for yourself. But until you do see it for yourself, I'm pretty powerless over your addiction. And the same way, if you're a spouse of somebody or a family member who has alcoholism or addiction, you're not going to change them by yourself. But what you can do is you can change yourself and not continue to enable or give the person money or bail them out of jail or make excuses for them or whatever it is that you're doing right now that's only keeping the person in their lizard brain. And so we're appealing to all these people that are out there that are listening, that we want to try to get you the help that you need, because we understand that it's very difficult for you to get it on your own.
Exactly. And Al-Anon is a wonderful, wonderful source to go to.
Absolutely.
And what I understand and what I've learned from Al-Anon today as a recovered alcoholic is that when, that time and date when we are cut off, when we are, there is no more, you're through, is really a glorious day in our lives. Alcoholics Anonymous is full of people who are sober and happy and serene because that day finally came.
Right.
Where someone had, and I think it's the ultimate act of love, Dr. Troncale. I really do. To be able to experience the kind of pain it would take personally to be able to cut someone you love off totally, emotionally, financially, the whole 9 yards. That's an incredibly difficult decision, but it is a decision of love.
It is. And I would encourage anybody out there who is struggling with this whole thing about what do I do, what should I do, what can I do. Again, please think about doing the opposite of what you would normally think about doing in any given situation, because all of this treatment is completely counterintuitive. All of this stuff with what we talked about with the lizard brain, the only way to counter the lizard brain is to do the opposite of what you would normally do, whether you're an alcoholic addict or whether you're somebody who is codependent. Whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that's not working for you, you have to do, and you have to have the courage to do the opposite of what you would normally do. So however hard it is for you to say that you're not going to give the alcoholic another $100, or however it is, if you have a son or a daughter who's living in your house under the influence, that you kick them out of the house and you say, oh, it's a terrible thing. What's going to happen to them? How are they going to survive? All those sorts of things. You have to have the courage to be able to go ahead and take that step in love so that that person can wake up and basically have the reality check that they need.
If I would have been enabled maybe 6 more months, it'd have killed me.
Absolutely.
That would have been the end of it. It would have been the end of my life. There's no question. When I was cut off, I was cut off, and look what happened. I got sober and serene, happy, and I'm here with you today. And Dr. Joseph Troncale, I cannot thank you enough. Your explanation, your time here has just been absolutely invaluable, and we are in your debt.
Always my pleasure.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Joseph Troncale. We'll be back with more of Trudge the Road in just a moment, brought to you by livefrog.com. This is Trudge the Road.
You've been listening to Trudge the Road, brought to you by livefrog.com. LiveFrog stands for firmly relying on God's grace every day. That's livefrog.com. Thanks for listening, and join us for Trudge the Road next week, right here on the Trudge the Road Radio Network.